Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
The thing about death is that it doesn't ask for your permission, and it sure as hell doesn't give you a heads up when it's about to snatch everything that matters from your chest and leave you standing in a kitchen with the refrigerator door open, wondering what you came in there for in the first place. Maggie was only 13 and full of fire, full of those teenage declarations about how she'd never wear bootcut jeans and how nobody understood Taylor Swift like she did. She was my only child, my only constant after the kind of divorce that leaves you staring at walls and talking to ceiling fans because the silence gets too loud to ignore. It happened on a Thursday morning in early spring, the kind of day when everything looks like a fresh start, the grass starting to green again, the smell of something wet and alive in the air, the birds doing their usual screaming at the sun. Maggie had gotten up early for school, complained about her hair, slammed the bathroom door, and then 5 minutes later she was on the floor of the hallway, clutching her chest and gasping like the world had suddenly become too heavy for her lungs. The paramedics came fast, but not fast enough, and when I heard one of them mutter, "aortic dissection," I felt the world tilt just slightly, like someone had knocked the legs out from under the planet itself. They said it was a fluke, a rare congenital defect that doesn't show up on routine tests, a cruel twist of biology that nobody could have seen coming. One moment she was there, breathing, rolling her eyes, begging me for coffee, and the next I was signing papers in a white-walled hospital room with someone named Dr. Havers trying to explain how quick it had all been, like that was supposed to make it hurt less. The funeral home was quiet when I called. The director sounded like he'd been expecting my voice, calm, measured, already prepared for my questions. I picked the smallest casket they had and chose lilies because Maggie hated roses, said they looked like flowers that thought too highly of themselves. I wrote the obituary myself. I selected the music. I called the pastor. I scheduled the service for the following Saturday, thinking it gave people enough time to rearrange their lives, to show up for the girl who should have had hers just beginning. I called my parents first. My mother's voice cracked a little, but she didn't cry. My father asked if the church had parking. They didn't ask what I needed. They didn't ask what Maggie might have wanted. My mom said, "She's in a better place now," which felt like someone tossing a wet towel over an open wound. I thanked them anyway. The next day, my sister Rachel called. Rachel, who always spoke like she was on a speakerphone and the whole room needed to hear her thoughts, launched straight into her concern. "Claire, I just saw the obituary," she said. "And I mean, this is awful, but you've got the service scheduled on the same day as my housewarming." For a second, I thought maybe she meant she hadn't realized. Maybe she was about to say she'd cancel, push her party back a week, reschedule the caterers, hell, something. But no. What followed was a casual suggestion, delivered in that brittle, polished tone she uses when she thinks she's being diplomatic. "Could you move the funeral? Just one day? I mean, I've already sent the invites and everything. It's just not ideal." I stood there in my living room, still wearing the same sweatshirt I'd been in when the paramedics wheeled my daughter away, and felt my ears buzz like a wasp had just flown straight through my skull. "You want me to move Maggie's funeral?" I said slowly, "so it doesn't interfere with your party?" Rachel sighed. "It's not a party. It's a housewarming. And listen, I'm not saying her death isn't tragic, but people have lives. Things planned. I mean, I barely have time to process all this, Claire. I'm under so much pressure." I hung up before I could say what I wanted to say, because there's a point at which words just become weapons you don't need to swing. I assumed she'd come around, cancel her damn party, show up with her glossy hair and her tight dresses, and at least pretend to mourn. But that's not what happened. 2 days before the funeral, I got an email. Not a call, not a knock on the door, an email from my parents. They wouldn't be attending the service. They were devastated, of course, but they felt it was important to support Rachel during this exciting transition in her life. They said they hoped I would understand and forgive, and that they'd light a candle for Maggie during brunch. I stared at that screen for so long my eyes stopped blinking. Then I printed the message, folded it carefully, and placed it in the inside pocket of my funeral jacket. I carried it with me on the day my daughter was buried, through the empty pews, through the hymns no one sang, through the quiet room where only 11 people sat, including the pastor, who I paid to be there. And yes, before you jump in, I know that makes 12. But if you have to pay someone to witness your grief, they don't really count, do they? The air was heavy with spring that day, thick and green and suffocating. And when I stepped outside after the service and checked my phone, I saw a photo posted by Rachel, standing next to her new kitchen island, holding a glass of rose, surrounded by people who used to know Maggie. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to celebrate, even when life's complicated." And that was the moment. Not the funeral. Not the call. Not the email. That photo. That sentence. That moment was when I stopped. It rained the morning of the funeral, but not enough to feel symbolic, not enough to soak the earth and give me some pathetic metaphor for grief, just that half-hearted, misty drizzle that makes everything gray and wet without really giving anything back. I stood there in a black dress that didn't fit right anymore, not because my body had changed, but because nothing about the world fit anymore. I watched them lower Maggie's casket into the ground while my hands shook so badly I had to press them into my coat pockets just to stop the trembling from spreading. There were 10 people in the church. 10. Not counting the pastor, though maybe I should. That would technically make 11, but I don't think you should include someone who had to be paid to be there. So I'll say 10. And before you argue, no, I'm not counting the florist who dropped the flowers off and left without looking me in the eye, and I'm not counting the neighbor who sat in the back row and left before the final prayer. 10 people. For a girl who smiled at strangers, who cried when she saw homeless animals in parking lots, who once brought her lunch to school just to give it away to a friend who forgot theirs. 10 people. While, on the other side of town, my sister hosted a catered brunch with mini quiches and hand-lettered place cards and a tower of cupcakes with her initials in gold fondant. I know this because they posted everything. Every moment of that day, every champagne toast, every interior shot of her new kitchen backsplash, every smile from people who used to call me family was captured and filtered and shared like a goddamn marketing campaign. Rachel posted a story from her sunroom, hair curled, dress flawless, holding a mimosa with her favorite smug tilt of the chin. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to celebrate, even when life's complicated." That word, complicated, did something to me. Like someone shoved a hand into my chest and twisted. My daughter dying wasn't complicated. It was final. It was brutal. It was a tear in the center of my life so wide nothing would ever close it again. A new backsplash is not complicated. Scheduling your housewarming on the same day as your niece's funeral is not complicated. It's cruel. It's petty. It's unforgivable. But the real blow came later that night. After I came home and peeled off the dress that now felt more like a shroud, after I sat on the edge of Maggie's bed just long enough to smell her shampoo still clinging to the pillow, after I walked around the house turning lights on and off because silence had teeth now, I opened my phone and saw the comment. Under Rachel's post, with its caption about celebration and complication, there it was, my mother's comment. Simple, small, deliberate. Life goes on, sweetheart. Not rest in peace, Maggie. Not thinking of Claire today. Just a pat on the back, public and polished, for the daughter who hadn't lost anything that day. For the daughter whose life continued, whose schedule remained intact, whose status was still something to be celebrated. I sat there staring at it, not blinking, not breathing, until my vision started to blur. Then I opened my contacts and started deleting. One by one. My mother. My father. Rachel. Her husband. The aunts. The cousins. All of them. Gone. Like sweeping a table clean in one hard motion. I didn't do it out of rage. I didn't cry. I just deleted until only one name remained. One old friend who'd sat beside me at the funeral without saying a word, whose hand never let go of mine once. I left her in there, and no one else. Later that night, I sat down and wrote a letter, not an email, not a text, not a dramatic social media post for everyone to dissect. A real letter, with pen and paper and words that bled a little as I wrote them. I folded it neatly and placed it in an envelope, sealed it, and on the front I wrote, "To the family." The next morning, I drove back to the cemetery. The sky was clear this time, and the grass still damp with yesterday's half-hearted rain. I knelt beside Maggie's grave and brushed a leaf off the headstone. Then I dug a small hole just to the right of it, deep enough that no animal would bother with it, shallow enough for me to feel the cold earth touch my knuckles. I placed the envelope inside, covered it back up, and pressed my palm into the soil like I was giving something back to the ground that had taken everything from me. I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat there, staring at her name carved into stone, thinking about the party still echoing in someone else's kitchen, the clinking of glasses, the click of heels on tile, the laughter rising like smoke while I sat in the dirt with the only person who had ever needed me fully. That letter is still there. I buried it with her, not because I needed them to find it, but because I needed to know it was somewhere they'd never dare to go. I left my words with the only soul who would have understood them. And that's when I knew I wasn't just done with the party, I was done with the people who threw it. There's something oddly liberating about not responding, about hearing the phone ring and letting it echo into nothing, about watching message notifications pile up like snow you've already decided not to shovel. I stopped answering the day after I buried the letter beside Maggie, and I haven't felt a single urge to go back. The silence, once sharp and biting, softened into something I could live inside without choking. It became the only room in the house where I could breathe. Thanksgiving came and went with all the usual glossy invitations, the texts from my mother in her passive-aggressive tone, the ones that said, "We're keeping a seat warm for you." As if guilt could bring me back to a table where nobody remembered how to say Maggie's name. I didn't reply. I didn't bake anything. I didn't explain why I wasn't coming. Let them set an extra place and look at it all night like something important was missing. Because it was. And if they couldn't feel the shape of that absence in their bones, then they never deserved a damn thing from me again. Rachel sent a message sometime in December. Short, clipped, but pretending to be heartfelt. "We need to talk about healing." As if healing was a shared project we could pick up like old paintbrushes and work on together. Like it wasn't something she'd spat on the moment she opened her front door to strangers and toasted to her new countertops while I was trying to pick out a burial dress for a girl who never made it to 8th grade. I deleted the message without reading past the first sentence. Not because it hurt, because it didn't. Not anymore. What it did was irritate. It buzzed under my skin like a gnat that didn't know it had overstayed its welcome, like some part of her truly believed that healing was a thing we could schedule around wine and apologies. I knew better. Healing doesn't come in messages. And it sure as hell doesn't come from people who stepped over your child's grave on the way to a party. Then the Christmas card came. Classic Rachel. High-gloss paper, smiling family of 4 in matching sweaters, her kids holding candy canes while snow fell perfectly in the background. The caption said, "Feeling grateful, feeling full of love." No mention of Maggie. Not even a token line. Not even a damn snowflake to mark that someone in the family was missing. I turned the card over and read the back, just to be sure. Nothing. My parents had signed it with a little note. "Thinking of you during the season. Hope next year is lighter." Lighter. Like grief was some grocery bag I could put down and forget at the bottom of the cart. That night I started closing the accounts. Not the credit cards or utilities, that came later. I'm talking about the soft ones. The family photo archive we used to share. The calendar where we tracked birthdays and dinners. The Netflix account I used to let them borrow. One by one, I shut off the lights in every digital room we'd once shared, until the only things left were mine, untouched, and completely out of their reach. When I inherited the house from my grandfather, long before Maggie was born, I always assumed I'd pass it down to her. She loved that place, especially the porch swing and the way the light hit the hallway in the morning. After the funeral, I didn't go back there for weeks. But when I finally did, I walked every room and decided something that surprised even me. I wasn't going to keep it. I wasn't going to sell it either. I transferred the property to a nonprofit that builds transitional housing for teen girls aging out of the foster system. It's theirs now. Maggie would have liked that. She would have told me to do it. And for once, I listened. When the deed was finalized and the last signature dried, I got a voicemail from my father, his voice full of that particular brand of old man frustration that sounds like a scolding wrapped in disappointment. "You're being dramatic, Claire," he said. "Don't throw the family away. You'll regret this when it's too late." I didn't call him back. I didn't even save the message. I just listened to the words, stared out the window while they washed over me, and then hit delete without a second thought. The following week, someone knocked on my door. Not a call, not a text, an actual knock, the kind that carries weight, the kind that makes you pause before answering. I looked through the peephole and saw him, Rachel's husband, Mark. He looked tired, pale, holding his car keys like they might fly away if he let them go. When I opened the door, he didn't even say hello. Just stood there on my porch, rubbing the back of his neck, then said, "Rachel's losing it. She says you've been watching her." And I smiled. Not wide, not cruel, just enough for him to realize something had shifted for good. Because I hadn't been watching. But maybe, just maybe, she should have been watching me. The thing about silence is that it teaches you to listen differently, not just to voices, but to timing, to gaps, to the absence of things that used to be constant. For weeks after Mark showed up at my door talking about Rachel losing it, I didn't move, didn't poke, didn't prod, didn't respond, because sometimes the best thing to do is absolutely nothing at all. Let the storm pull the roof off the house and just stand there in the dry corner you built for yourself when no one was looking. Rachel's voice hadn't reached me directly in months, but her mess echoed loud enough through other people. I started hearing bits and pieces from the grocery store clerk, the former coworker who still liked my posts from time to time, even the mailman who probably shouldn't have said anything but clearly enjoyed the drama a little too much. Her business, the real estate firm she had plastered her face all over, was crumbling like a sandcastle against a rising tide, and the water wasn't coming from me, not directly anyway. They said it started with a blog post, some local watchdog publication digging into shady dealings in the housing market, low-income buyers being steered away from certain neighborhoods, forms going missing, escrow accounts mismanaged. Nothing concrete at first, just smoke. But smoke draws attention, and attention brings fire inspectors. Soon it wasn't just a blog post. It was a formal complaint filed with the state board, and after that, it was an official investigation. Subpoenas, audits, lawyers with names you don't want to see on the other side of a conference table. I never said a word about it. Never told anyone I was the one who'd sent the tip, not with my name, of course, just a neat little package of public information and a few internal documents she probably assumed no one else had access to anymore. But I had them. I'd helped her once, back when we still talked, when she still called me for favors, before Maggie was gone and Rachel decided my pain was less important than her Pinterest-worthy brunch menu. She'd asked me to help her organize some digital files, back when she was too busy to do it herself, and I'd made a backup just in case. And now the just in case had become the fuse on a very public fire. Her name started slipping out of mouths that used to praise her. Clients vanished. Deals fell through. Her pristine image, designer heels, sharp suits, perfect smile, smeared just enough to make people stop returning her calls. She went from featured interviews to damage control faster than she could post another inspirational quote about growth and resilience. My parents, who once couldn't be bothered to attend their granddaughter's funeral, suddenly remembered how phones worked. My mother called 3 times in 1 week, voice trembling like a woman who couldn't quite figure out how her golden child had gone from rising star to cautionary tale. On the 3rd call, she left a voicemail, the kind laced with tears and half-choked sentences about how this family's falling apart, and Rachel's not herself, and please, Claire, we need to come together. As if they hadn't already chosen what mattered to them and buried the rest in the dirt with the child they never talk about anymore. I listened to the voicemail in full, every stammering second of it, and then I deleted it. Not because it didn't affect me, it did, but not the way she'd intended. It didn't hurt. It didn't inspire some sudden rush of mercy. It just confirmed what I already knew. They only reach for you when the walls start caving in, never when you're the one buried under the rubble. I didn't need to say a word. That was the beauty of it. I didn't need to explain or accuse or perform my grief in front of them like some grotesque little stage show. They were unraveling all on their own, one thread at a time, and I didn't even have to be in the room. That night, I logged into the old family photo account, the one we used to keep digital memories of birthdays and beach trips, Christmases and school plays. Maggie was in almost every album, always smiling, always bright, always the center of whatever frame she was in. I scrolled through the photos, one by one, watched her face shift from toddler to child to almost teen, and felt something ancient rise in my throat. They hadn't looked at these in years. I knew that. But I also knew they liked having them. Liked pointing at them, showing them to others, as if they had anything to do with the joy that lived in her smile. As if they hadn't dismissed her life as complicated, hadn't prioritized canapes over caskets. They didn't deserve her memory. They didn't get to keep a piece of her frozen in pixels just to make themselves feel better. So I selected every photo of Maggie, every one she'd ever been in, and I deleted them. Not out of rage, but out of reclamation. They belonged to me. She belonged to me. And if they weren't going to say her name, they didn't get to keep her face. When I closed the laptop, the room was quiet. Not the hollow silence of grief, but the deep, earned kind, the kind that means the storm has passed and whatever's left is yours to rebuild or burn. And I wasn't done yet. There comes a point after enough silence, after enough unanswered calls and unopened mail and ignored invitations, where you don't just move on, you harden, and not in the way people think. It's not armor. It's not bitterness. It's more like removing the weight from your chest that you've been carrying for so long you forgot it wasn't part of your body. What I let go of in those months wasn't just the people who failed me. It was the expectation that they ever would have done anything different. They used to say I was the quiet one, the good listener, the one who always smoothed things over when Rachel threw tantrums or when Mom took things too far with her biting little jabs wrapped in compliments. But the truth is I was just surviving them. Chronic peacemaking is what you do when you learn early that speaking up doesn't get you anything but more trouble. For years, I played that role. The invisible glue. The one who remembered birthdays and stepped back when Rachel needed the spotlight, who kept things from falling apart, who made the effort no one noticed until I stopped making it altogether. After Maggie died, I didn't just lose a child. I lost my reason to keep pretending any of this was okay. And the beautiful, terrible thing about grief is that it makes you honest in a way that no one wants to deal with. It strips everything down to bone. It makes polite conversation unbearable. It makes you walk out of rooms where people are laughing at the wrong things. It makes you delete pictures and burn bridges and say no without offering an explanation. But I didn't reflect on what I lost. That part had already played out in my mind too many times to count. What I started thinking about more was what I let go of, because those things, as it turned out, were the real burden. I let go of their opinions, their judgment, their tired need to be seen as the kind of people who'd done their best. I let go of their validation, which was always conditional anyway. And I let go of the guilt they used like currency, trading it for silence and calling it family. I spent weeks creating something just for Maggie. Not a shrine, not a memorial, but a private archive, digital folders sorted by year, videos, photos, audio clips of her reading bedtime stories into the microphone when she was 8. A birthday letter she wrote me once and folded into a paper airplane because we were fighting that day and she didn't want to hand it to me directly. I stored it all on a hard drive that never connects to the internet. It's not for public consumption. It's not for likes or shares. It's for me. And maybe someday for no one. Because grief doesn't need an audience. Love doesn't always have to perform. They called it cruel when they found out. Somehow, through whatever vine they still passed gossip along, it reached them that I deleted Maggie's images from the family archive. That I was erasing history, acting out, punishing them. But none of that was true. I wasn't erasing anything. I was reclaiming. I was putting the story back where it belonged, in hands that had held her, fed her, carried her, grieved her. They wanted her memory without the responsibility of acknowledging her loss. They wanted to light a candle without attending the funeral. So I stood again at her grave, months later, after the last of the snow had melted and the earth was soft again. I placed a fresh lily on the stone, not because I believed in rituals, but because Maggie loved lilies and hated roses, thought they were too smug. And I whispered, just loud enough to hear myself say it, "They erased you first." The envelope I buried beside her that day, back when I realized they weren't coming, still hasn't been touched. It stays there, sealed and protected by the same soil that cradles what's left of her body. Inside that envelope is the document they'll never get their hands on, the one that states in clear, legal terms that I have sole control of Maggie's ashes, her likeness, and her digital legacy. That no one, not Rachel, not my parents, not a single soul from the bloodline I used to belong to, can lay claim to her image, her memory, or even speak her name in any official capacity. They don't get to share her story. They don't get to print her picture in a card or put her face in some slideshow to remind people they cared once. Because they didn't. Not when it counted. And love that skips the hard parts doesn't count. Not to me. Not anymore. I walked back from the grave with my shoulders a little straighter, not out of triumph, but out of release. Because I wasn't angry. I wasn't wounded. I was simply done. They stopped being my family the day they called my daughter a minor event, and I stopped being the woman who needed them to notice.